to wrap things up, this to me is the last of the Bond films. Even though, yes, there are plenty more Bond films after this. This to me is the last Bond film because every film after this movie either tries callbacks or throwbacks to every previous of these first 6 films in some way or form. Whether it's a train scene, whether it's a skiing scene, whether it's an underwater scene, there's always some kind of callback to these movies. It's also fitting to say that this is the last movie of the 60s, and this kind of also ties into why Lazenby left. So, again, like I had mentioned before, Lazenby is getting a little arrogant with the whole I'm the star kind of thing. It's the end of the 60s. This is 68. If you know anything about American history, 68's a pretty tumultuous year in America. There's a lot going on. You had Vietnam War. There was the anti-establish movement. You know, we had hippies and that kind of thing. He was kind of getting a little more into that with the drugs, growing out his hair and that kind of thing. And this movie has shades of that in the movie with, you know, the mod look and feel of the costumes and things like that, like the cravat that I wore today in honor of this movie.
Psychedelia shit going on and how they dress and all that.
Yeah, so you see a little bit of that in the movie. Lazenby would say, and this is part of his, you know, his agent was kind of convincing him and say, look, you know, like these Bond thing, this is going to end. Like, this isn't going to continue. And he had a point. You know what I mean? Like, you got to remember at the time, and when we get to some future movies, you'll kind of see maybe he was kind of right, that the Bond thing as what it is now is going to kind of fade away. Trying to hold on to this Bond thing. So what does the Bond films do? They find what's popular right now. How do we keep this relevant and latch onto that as a vehicle to keep these things going?
Yeah.
So in that regards, his agent was kind of right. But he was looking at it and seeing like the anti-establishment movie being a big thing. Easy Rider, MASH, these were more popular movies that were becoming more popular. People were kind of stemming away from this establishment type film, which is the Bond films are very much so. And this so much that when Lazenby went to the premiere, he grew out his hair and the producers didn't even want him to. And before this, the producers even had begged him to sign his contract, which he wouldn't do, for a 7-film deal after this film. So he wasn't even signing. They even like offered him 7 films. And they offered him $1 million. He had a fucking case. And Harry Saltzman was like, fucking take the money.
This never happened to the other fella.
Sign the contract, and he wouldn't do it out of his own arrogance or whatever. So really it came down to him just kind of being like disillusioned with it and just like, I don't really want to do this. I didn't want to continue with this, which would leave the franchise in kind of a conundrum. And that's also why, again, I consider this in that Connery era, even though he's not in this movie, is because of that. Also to note, originally, they had an idea where this movie could have led. Like, this could have been the beginning of a new franchise in a way, like a soft reboot of sorts. And the idea originally was that the scene with Tracy getting shot and them driving off and all that stuff was going to be in the next film. So they shot the movie, and Peter Hunt was like, we're going to shoot a movie in such a way that he drives off in the wedding, and that's the end of the movie. Then when we start Diamonds Are Forever, which was still planned to be the next film, the beginning of the movie would be them driving,
and then Tracy
whacked. Getting shot, and then that would lead into the next Bond film being Diamonds Are Forever, which, yeah, that would be a very strong opener for the next Bond film. Of course, they didn't do that.
It certainly would have weakened this movie, and I think we all are interested in that universe out there that has Sean Connery starring in this picture. It really would have been interesting to see because I'm so torn on Lazenby. I've seen this movie a million times and I think he's all right, but I watched this and then I watched Dr. No and then I watched this again, and Lazenby just straight up doesn't have it.
No,
he just doesn't have that certain element that makes him Bond, and I'm okay with him in this movie. I like this movie. Again, I don't think it belongs at the bottom, but what's tragic though, he works for this movie.
Film, but if you were to put Lazenby in the other films, he wouldn't. And some people would argue that even if Connery was in this movie, hypothetically, there's other hypotheticals besides Connery being disillusioned with the franchise and all that. But hypothetically, had he been in this movie, I don't think you would have gotten the same movie because of the inexperience, at least, and the vulnerability. Things that I think actually we see in later films, probably maybe to a better degree. But regardless, like, people would always say, maybe if Connery was in this movie, it would have been the best Bond film. I'm not necessarily on that camp. I'm like,
Maybe Connery was saved by the fact that he wasn't in this movie.
I don't know.
You know,
Maybe.
like Lazenby came along.
I mean,
and
it's all
he kind of filled in
hypothetical
this
at this
gap.
point. Like, who knows?
Totally. All we can do is do a deep fake. Somebody can do a deep fake
we can do
someday of
that.
Sean Connery starring in this movie. But all in all, what it comes down to is, as much as George Lazenby may be the Ringo Starr of the James Bonds, he's still a motherfucking James Bond. And on that note, the man deserves our toast for being Bond James Bond, even if only for one time.
Yep.
So cheers to George.
I'm going to do a bit of a tradition break here and promote one more cheers, and that's to Tracy. Best Bond girl, doesn't even finish the film. Gets killed before, right at the end.
Yeah.
To Tracy as well.
And she had just recently passed away too, so